Hello, welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. The IMF lowered its growth forecast for the global economy this year to 3.3%, reflecting the slowest pace of growth since the height of the global financial crisis. Advanced economies are advised to keep accommodative monetary policy measures in place. President Park Geun-hye urges inter-Korean cooperation to establish response systems for diseases and natural disasters and help the two Koreas inch closer towards reunification. Despite a 1999 International Labor Organization report documenting the forceful mobilization of thousands of Koreans and Chinese to Japan's industrial sites requested for UNESCO World Heritage status, Shinzo Abe continues his denial of facts. The IMF downgrades its global growth forecast for this year, citing a weak first quarter in the United States. It also identified the eurozone and China as possible flashpoints, although it left their growth outlooks untouched. Our Sohn Jung-in starts us off.
In its revised World Economic Outlook released on Thursday, the IMF lowered its growth forecast for the global economy this year to 3.3%, down from its April prediction of 3.5%. The latest figure represents the slowest pace of growth since it dipped below zero in 2009 during the height of the global financial crisis. The organization identified the U.S. economy's weaker than expected first quarter performance as the main reason for its trimmed outlook. The IMF cut its U.S. growth forecast for the year to 2.5% from 3.1%. As for China, the fund left its forecast unchanged at 6.8%, saying the recent stock market rout there pales in size to China's massive economy.
The first one is the puncture of what was rather obviously a stock market bubble. Stock markets had increased by 150% in less than a year.
The IMF also maintained its forecast for a pickup in growth in the eurozone at 1.5%, as it predicts the debt crisis in Greece will have a marginal effect on the global economy.
The mechanical links between Greece and the rest of the world are limited, be it on the trade side or the finance side. That's reassuring.
The organization advised advanced economies to keep accommodative monetary policy measures in place to support economic activity and boost inflation. Korea's growth forecast was not included in the revised outlook, but was set at 3.3% in April. Sohn Jung-in, Arirang News.
Debt-ridden Greece has submitted a new proposal to its international creditors offering deeper than expected economic reforms. But according to our Han Da-eun, Athens is also asking for a new bailout package. Take a look.
In a last-ditch effort to save itself from imminent financial collapse, Greece has offered to make painful spending cuts, pension reforms, and raise taxes. Eurozone officials say Greece proposed austerity measures between 12 to 13 billion euros that'll be carried out over the next 2 years. The measures include raising taxes and VAT rates, phasing out solidarity grants for pensioners by 2019, and cutting the defense budget by up to 300 million euros by 2016. The proposal calls for 4 billion euros more than the previous bailout terms voted down by the Greek referendum. That may please the cash-strapped nation's creditors, but Athens has also increased its demands. Greece is requesting a new 53.5 billion euro bailout package and debt restructuring of some 320 billion euros. Athens is planning to make more concessions than expected to prevent defaulting on its upcoming set of repayments. However, difficulties are expected as Germany, its biggest creditor nation, strongly opposes any kind of debt restructuring.
I have said that a classic haircut is out of the question for me, and that hasn't changed between yesterday and today.
Greece's radical leftists will be another hurdle to overcome. The hardline members of the Syriza party are expected to criticize the austerity measures contained in the new proposal when the Greek parliament votes on Friday. Athens' new offer will be discussed by the eurozone finance ministers on Saturday prior to a full EU leaders summit slated for Sunday. And then, Arirang News.
Meeting with the Unification Preparation Committee this morning, President Park Geun-hye said the two Koreas need to cooperate to protect Koreans on both sides of the border amid the spread of new diseases around the world. Regarding steps to strengthen inter-Korean cooperation in healthcare, the president asked the committee to begin providing vaccines and antibiotics for North Koreans suffering from tuberculosis or rubella. In the long run, she said the two Koreas, with the cooperation of neighboring countries like China and Japan, could contribute to establishing a firm disease response system in the region. Assessing that Pyongyang has shown some intent to resume dialogue with Seoul as of late, President Park said her administration is always open to renewing dialogue and cooperation. Meanwhile, the president has tapped a former ruling party lawmaker as her new senior political secretary. He is Hyun Gi-hwan, a member of the previous 18th National Assembly. Hyun's background, labor. He led the External Cooperation Bureau at the Federation of Korean Trade Unions. The presidential office said the senior secretary's ability to handle political and state affairs, social and networking skills were considered, attributes that should enable him to communicate well with the political community on behalf of the president. His predecessor, Cho Yun-sun, resigned in May after a delay in parliamentary approval of a bill to reform the public employee pension. The National Assembly Standing Committees began deliberating on the government's multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget plan this Friday. But as main rival parties lock horns over the size of the budget, it's unclear whether the measures will pass the Assembly by the government's deadline, July 20th. The ruling Saenuri Party wants to pass the $10.4 billion plan. The main opposition NPAD demands around $5 billion be cut from the proposal. The Liberal Party conceded that additional funds are necessary due to the MERS outbreak and the ongoing drought, but said it cannot accept the allotment of $5 billion to cover a tax revenue deficit. The ruling party argued that since the goal is to stimulate the economy, the size of the budget must be maximized to yield any substantial effects. More solid evidence that Koreans were forced to slave labor at Japanese sites recently bestowed with UNESCO World Heritage status. A local news agency has obtained a 15-year-old report from the International Labor Organization that shows forced labor did take place at those facilities. Our Kim Yeon-bin has the details.
Yonhap News Agency reported on Friday that forced labor at Japanese industrial facilities was proven to be fact 16 years ago. The Seoul-based agency obtained the International Labor Organization report from March of 1999, which states that thousands of Koreans and Chinese were forcefully mobilized to the industrial facilities during World War II. At the time, the ILO labeled the forced mobilization as a violation of the convention. The report lists numerous testimonies of mistreatment and harsh working conditions, which resulted in many deaths. The fatality rate of workers averaged roughly 18%, with some facilities at nearly 29%. The report also revealed that, unlike what was promised, most workers received little or no pay. The statement read by the Japanese ambassador to UNESCO on Sunday acknowledged that there were a large number of Koreans and others that were forced to work. The ILO's Forced Labor Convention states, the term forced or compulsory labor shall mean any work for service under the menace penalty, which a person has not offered voluntarily. However, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga maintains that the work at the facility did not constitute a violation. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
Despite the evidence piling up against them, Tokyo continues its attempt to weasel its way out of admitting the fact that they forced thousands into slavery and death at the aforementioned wartime sites. A move that's further fueling Korea-Japan tensions. Connie Kim has more on Japan's continued quest to distort history.
The Japanese leader says Korea has never objected to its foreign minister's claim that the expression forced to work in the English language translation of its statement to the World Heritage Committee does not mean forced labor. Speaking at a parliamentary meeting on Friday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the phrase forced to work in the English version of the statement was used to convey that some of the laborers were forced into conscription. Abe also said the Korean government made it clear that it'll not include Japan's statements in its compensation claims for Koreans forced into labor during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. After Tokyo's wartime industrial facilities were listed as UNESCO sites this weekend, Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida sparked tensions between Seoul and Tokyo by giving an ambiguous translation of its statement to its domestic audience. Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se dismissed Kishida's comments, saying the English statement leaves no room for controversy and has been officially adopted by the World Heritage Committee. Yoon added there is no need to predict Japan's next move because it must submit a progress report by the end of 2017, which will be reviewed by the World Heritage Committee the following year. If Japan's progress is deemed unsatisfactory, the sites could be removed from the UNESCO list. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
An American expert on North Korea says the regime has the capacity to make batches of anthrax through a pesticide research center. Radio Free Asia reports Melissa Hanam, a senior research associate at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, made that judgment after analyzing photos of leader Kim Jong-un visiting the Pyongyang Biotechnical Institute last month. She thinks the facility could be producing military-sized batches of biological weapons. However, speaking on conditions of anonymity, an official from South Korea's defense ministry says in order to produce anthrax, a facility would need secondary and tertiary levels of protection, which the center in question lacks, suggesting North Korea is not capable of producing military-sized batches of anthrax. The U.S. Army has confirmed that it's going to reduce the number of troops to 450,000 over the next 2 years due to budget cuts. Initially, U.S. troops in South Korea were predicted not to be affected, but our Na Young-young reports that may not be the case.
From October, the U.S. Army will gradually begin cutting the number of active duty troops by 40,000. By 2017, the number of troops will have dropped from the current 490,000 to 450,000, the smallest number since 1940. USA Today reported about the cuts earlier this week, but citing military sources in Washington, Korean media outlets said the number of American troops in South Korea would remain the same. However, following the U.S. Army's official announcement in Virginia on Thursday, that information might have been wide of the mark.
Unfortunately, under sequestration and automatic budget cuts, today's announcement may not be the last. Unless the provisions of the Budget Control Act are changed or reversed, the Army will have to cut an additional 30,000 soldiers by 2019.
U.S. Army officials say this will affect nearly every Army installation inside and outside of the United States. And experts and critics say the consequences of the budget-driven decision will extend far beyond the Korean Peninsula. Senator John McCain, chairman of the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, has called the plan dangerous. And Randy George, the Army official who led Thursday's press conference, also added later that the extra cuts could put the U.S. at significant risk. Since 2012, the U.S. Army has already cut 80,000 soldiers, shuttering 13 brigade combat teams, including 2 in Germany and 1 in South Korea. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Turning our eyes to Hong Kong, a strain of influenza is raising red flags in the region, claiming around 560 lives this year alone. Some even insist that it is more hazardous than the MERS virus because the strain can be spread by airborne transmission. Our Kim Ji-yeon brings us this report.
Hong Kong influenza, the H3N2 virus, is spreading at an alarming rate in the region. The symptoms include high fever, nausea, and diarrhea, with the possibility of complications even resulting in death. Just last month, 40 patients succumbed to the virus.
Since Hong Kong influenza is transmitted through the air, it's significantly more contagious than the MERS virus. Those who contract the influenza may show similar symptoms to MERS in the initial stages, so misdiagnosis is possible.
Hong Kong health authorities recommend getting vaccinated and avoiding crowded places with poor ventilation. Despite the development of vaccines, it may prove futile in the containment of the spread. Local experts in Korea say it's imperative health authorities devise preventative measures against the H3N2 virus early on.
There's a high possibility vaccines will not work on the H3N2 once the strain of the virus mutates, which is highly likely.
The Korean Foreign Ministry has already issued a safety warning for those visiting Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Tourism Commission says 60.8 million tourists paid a visit to the city last year alone. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
4 out of 21 candidates have been approved for new duty-free businesses in Korea. The Korea Customs Service announced Friday that HDC Shilla, Hanwha Galleria, Time World, and SM Duty-Free were granted licenses for 3 locations in Seoul, with the Jeju Tourism Organization approved for Jeju Island. Competition was fierce during the bidding process. It is the first time in 15 years that the government has granted the coveted licenses. Korean stocks are ticking up as the Chinese stock market recovers. Korea's benchmark Kospi closed at 2,031.17 points at around 3 p.m. on Friday, up 0.17% from the previous close. China's Shanghai Composite Index also rose by more than 5% to surpass the 3,900-point level Friday afternoon. This follows China's rollout of emergency measures to stabilize its plunging stock market, which includes an interest rate cut by the central bank to gain the confidence of investors. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. More coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so do join us then. For now, thank you for watching.